Yes, I'm back. This is Richards. I'm going to discuss something that I think is on everyone's mind, and that is politics. I mean, I've got some serious qualms, some serious issues with the current administration allowing Ebola patients to go into our country and spread the disease of Ebola, which is now mutating faster than the flu is in most countries that it is open in. I mean, you've got a president, an administration, who does not want to work with the other party. You've got gridlock in Congress. You have the Democrats baiting the Republicans, race baiting. You've got the Democrats that are going out of their way to try to win the lowest common denominator with votes by subsidization. Now, you've got the GOP, who are basically the exact opposite. You've got them, they are anarcho-capitalists. The Democrats are a Orwellian police state communists, and the Republicans are anarcho-capitalists who will rape you for your pay. You've got the Democrats trying to take away your gun freedoms, which would be the only last stand against a police state. You've got the GOP trying to be the party of freedom, except they don't recognize gay marriage. They don't recognize the people's decision to put the substances into their body, and more importantly, that they do not allow stem cell research or promote stem cell research to advance medical studies because it is against their religion. We have serious crisis in Washington, D.C. today, where the government is watching people at a scale that is never before seen as a result of the greedy corporations who are trying to destabilize the Middle East so that they can go in and land grab like Germany is doing to Greece right now in the EU, and like Germany did to Yugoslavia in the 1990s. You've got the anarcho-capitalist corporations who are behind the Republican Party, who are basically trying to appear as a party of constitutional freedom, whereas they go out, they expand their corporate goals of their corporate goons over the seas, and they create what we have today, which is these terrorist rogue groups. They're very vicious groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all of those terrible groups that arose from the need to a call to arms of national security of these countries. Now, we all know why we're overseas. We're overseas because we are interested in the natural resources. We are overseas because we are interested in destabilizing the region, creating a democratic system, and getting more members to partake in the UN, which is the end goal to create a one world government. Don't get me wrong. I believe the Republicans are the better, lesser of two evils. Be honest, mostly because they are slightly more on the side of freedom of speech, and they are much more on the side of the right to bear arms, which, like I said, is the only thing that can defend us from the last stand against tyranny. What I think would be the best form of government would be for the Republicans to work with the Democrats, and the Democrats to work with the Republicans, vice versa. I mean, but the thing is, if you put the GOP, you took the basic foundations of the GOP, but you gave them the recognition of a gay marriage, and you gave them the legalization, or at least the criminalization of cannabis. You got rid of their ultra-conservative views on the war on drugs. You copied a policy like the EU, well, anyway, the country the Netherlands has. What you do is you legalize marijuana, like alcohol. You legalize cocaine, but you regulate the hard drugs like cocaine only to be in certain districts that have additional policing to reduce crime. You have a red light district in which the drugs are allowed to be used by adults, which they have to be proven to be adults, 21 years or older, without mental illness. But from there on, what you do is the drugs cannot leave those clubs, and those clubs can be only open certain hours of the day, and they can only be zoned in neighborhoods with additional policing in certain major cities. You would reduce the flow of illegal narcotics into the country by getting them and buying them in the private sector, the legal sector, which is regulated, and if a crime is committed against that sector, police can respond accordingly, whereas in the underground economy, they have to defend their trade with weapons, with guns, and they have to fight opposing members of that trade with violence. You're totally skirting the legal process because there is none. So they go right to violence. They don't think about a better way to market or vice versa, etc., etc. You're creating a criminal underground by having the war on drugs. I would like to see the GOP keep the message it has on guns. Keep the message it has on the First Amendment. I would like to see them change their stance on the war on drugs to reduce crime. I would like to see the Democrats and the GOP work together. And in essence, you have the best government as a result of that, as we saw with previous administrations. I'd like the race baiting to stop. Yes, there's racism. There's lots of racism in our country. There's racism in every country. Try going to the Middle East as a white American. Try going to, try going to any country where you're not welcome as a certain group. Amongst certain people you're going to have issues with. If you go in the Deep South, you go into Dixieland where there's places where there's rampant racism against African Americans, you're going to experience the racism. You go to certain parts of Africa where whites aren't welcome, or Middle East, as a result of American imperialism, you're going to experience racism. There's racism everywhere. I, for one, I'm against racism. I consider myself a libertarian. I believe in the equality of all freedoms for everyone. With the exclusion, of course, the enemies of the state, terrorists, or those such as people with mental illness trying to obtain a gun. I'm not, however, against someone who has shown rehabilitation from the criminal justice system a second chance with gun ownership, though I want it to be strictly regulated. Unfortunately, what you have today is you have American colleges indoctrinating the youth into Marxism. You have the certain political parties, certain political groups indoctrinating Marxism into the American person, the tearing away of private property privileges, the tearing away of the right to defend that property with weapons like firearms. They have the playback of emotional issues, the playback of lowest common denominator politics, demagoguery, in which they use tragedies to advance political goals. You have, like, for example, what happened in Ferguson, Missouri. I'm not going to say it was ignorance. I'm not going to say it was racism. I'm going to say it was criminal opportunism that resulted on that event. I'm not going to, from a Machiavellian standpoint, those protesters were doing something great. They were taking. From a moral standpoint, they were barbarians. And from a legal standpoint, they were anarchists. Do I think Michael Brown was the good old Leave the Beaver American boy down the street? No, obviously he was not. Anybody who does a strong armed robbery is generally going to be considered someone potentially dangerous when being pursued by a law enforcement officer. To the Europeans who are saying we have too much violence against people in the criminal justice system, too much use of weapons, too much use of firearms, etc., 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 In Scandinavia, that idea might work, but as you can see in most of the EU, you are having rapid rising of violent crime as a result of lack of repercussions, as such as being killed, being shot, result of lack of repercussions as a result of lower criminal sentencing, and therefore, with the influx of undocumented immigrants into a lot of the European Union today, you're also seeing a rampant rise in violent crime. Um, there are certain cities in the EU, even with their strict gun laws, and in the UK, that have topped certain American cities in the 1980s and in the early 90s at the peak of our murder rates. London is an extremely high murder rate, regardless of the gun ban. I understand that guns are still legal; they're just highly regulated. I, for one, I would like to see them adopt a more American style approach. Though I apologize, it's not my country. It's not really my say. I'm not a voter there, and therefore my opinion doesn't matter. If you actually respect your country enough, you should believe that. So, I mean, the Ebola crisis, I think, is like anything. It's going to be used as something blown out of proportion, and you're going to see biotechnic. You're going to see pharmaceutical companies come out, and they're going to make a killing after they blow it out of proportion. They're going to go on some government bidding list in those countries, even in our country, and they're going to overbid, and they're going to win, and they're going to make a shitload of money. The same thing with ISIS. You're going to see it's not some. Do I personally think it's some crazy fucking New World Order type thing? To some degree, it's a natural shift toward that because of human nature and our need to feel safe. But in reality, it's corporations. Not that corporations are bad. Corporations are good. Trust me. But I'm not some crazy communist asshole. But it's corporations that are. So like Halliburton, they're destroying the Middle East, rebuilding it. Like the oil companies are taking over lands. The Chinese are taking over Africa. The Russians are taking over parts of Africa. U.S. a little bit, taking their oil, taking their diamonds. You're gonna see the same thing with, like I said, you're gonna pay attention to who wins the bids in Africa on government public bids for companies, corporations, pharmaceutical corporations, biotechnical corporations in regards to this crisis. And take a look to see, with your opinions based on the need and necessity of those bids to have been won, the profit margin versus